Historically, the coyote features prominently in Native American mythology and folklore. In some stories, the coyote is a sacred being with creative powers. In other stories, the coyote is wily, deceptive, and a trickster, but almost always referred to as creative and intelligent. I am Marcia Sivek, and this is BeProvided Conservation Radio. These were the sounds of coyotes communicating, and audio provided by Gina Farr. These sounds may be more common since the pandemic, and we have all slowed down and had to shelter in place. Many people report observing these animals in places they had never expected. This is true for coyote sightings. Coyotes are highly adaptable to new environments. They are likely the first wild carnivore one will see. The coyote's adaptation to new environments are good for the coyote in one way, but in another way, it brings them close to people, specifically people's pets and livestock. This has caused fear and anger for coyotes when they are living so close to us. This is why animals such as coyotes, wolves, bobcats, and bears are not revered as sacred, intelligent, or creative. They are sadly considered varmints in some states. A varmint is defined as a troublesome wild animal, a pest to be rid of.
Many of these species really have no protections whatsoever with our state wildlife agencies and federal agencies. They often have a classification of non-game or predator or fur bearer, even varmint in some states. And what that translates to is that many of them can be killed 24/7 in unlimited numbers with almost any method imaginable. And that includes trapping, snaring, poisoning, bounties, killing contests. And most people have no idea that these practices are legal and really how many animals are being killed in this way.
This is Camilla Fox, founder of Project Coyote. She has been an animal lover as far back as she can remember. Her love of animals even prompted her to become a vegetarian at the age of 6. And while in college, she started a group to protect animals. To say the least, her entire career has been in the nonprofit realm of environmental protection and animal protection. It was in the 1990s she had the idea of Project Coyote.
It really was back in the late 90s that I saw a need and a niche for an organization that would be a voice for the most maligned and persecuted wild carnivores of North America. So in 2008, I started Project Coyote, and I started with a really amazing science advisory group, many of whom served on my graduate school committee, and they became sort of the founding science arm of our organization. And so from there, we started this national organization in Northern California, and our basic mission is to promote coexistence between people and wildlife through education, science, and advocacy. And we've been growing ever since. The work is, nonstop in terms of the need for these maligned, misunderstood predators. And we're making a lot of headway, which I know we'll talk about today, but there's also just a huge and growing need as well. Really, we're here to advocate on their behalf, to inspire people to care about them, see them as ecologically important animals worthy of our protection and respect, and then to change our laws and our regulations to better protect them.
That's great. So can you tell us what roles or the coyotes and other carnivores play in the ecosystem, and why are they so important to our ecosystem and world?
So the coyote has, in many ecosystems, moved into what we call an apex predator role. So this is largely a result of the killing of their greatest competitor, which is the gray wolf. So when gray wolves were almost extirpated in the lower 48, this opened up vacant niches that the coyote, as a very adaptable and resilient animal, has moved into. They're originally found in the West, and then with habitat changes and with the extirpation of wolves, they have gradually moved east. I will also say with that fossil evidence has also shown that a coyote-like canine existed throughout North America as far back as the Pleistocene. Wow. So it's very interesting to see the evolution of canines and the hybridization of canines throughout North America. But so the coyote has proven to be incredibly adaptable, intelligent, resilient in the face of massive persecution. And so despite this, they do play a very, very important ecological role. They help to, for example, keep rodent populations in check. They also help to keep mesocarnivore populations balanced. Mesocarnivores meaning foxes, raccoons, skunks, even cats in some areas. So by keeping the mesocarnivore populations in check, if you will, largely through competitive exclusion, not meaning direct predation necessarily, but they also, in that role, help songbird and ground bird biodiversity and abundance, because those mesocarnivores, those skunks, those raccoons, foxes, can prey on birds and bird eggs. So that's just one example of the many crucial ecological benefits that coyotes provide. And they're also wonderful scavengers, so they help to keep our ecosystems clean of dead things.
I know you've been talking about populations, or we have either on record or not, but we are in the West, and so I know we've been talking about some of the coyotes and wild carnivores in the West, but coyotes are pretty much all over the U.S. They're being found in the East, the Midwest, and even in the big city of Chicago, right?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Chicago, and actually not too long ago, several articles came out about the prevalence of coyotes in the Chicago region. There's actually been the longest urban coyote ecology study in that area, in the greater Chicago area. I think it's on year 22 now that they've been looking at diet, all sorts of elements of coyotes and how they really interface in the urban landscape and at the fringe of wildlands and more humanized landscapes. And so with that study, they've also shown that coyotes are providing a tremendous crucial role as rodent controllers in dense populated cities. So these elements, I think, are sometimes forgotten in terms of their critical role, even in our urban landscapes.
Well, this brings me to talk about some challenges that these wild carnivores like coyotes and bobcats and such are facing now. What challenges are they struggling with?
One of the biggest things that we face with any kind of large wild carnivore in North America is, as humans encroach into wildlife habitat, we bump up against the wild inhabitants there. And so those negative encounters, I would say, are increasing as human populations increase and habitat alteration. So part of what Project Coyote is about is providing solutions for how we can better coexist with these animals in both rural and urban areas. It's a constant challenge. Our state agencies are often cash and staff strapped, and they don't have enough resources to assist communities in promoting coexistence and providing the tools and the information to reduce negative encounters. So that's another reason why I started this organization, was to be able to not only advocate on behalf of wild carnivores, but also to provide the communities with concrete solutions for how we can mitigate negative encounters and really peacefully and safely coexist.
Talking about coexisting, I wanted to mention that I do see San Francisco has put effort into bringing awareness and safety to the coyote that are in the city as well as the people. I walked through the Presidio, and there are many signs educating people about coyotes in the area. Is this part of a Project Coyote effort?
We do partner with various agencies in San Francisco around promoting coexistence. So San Francisco Animal Care and Control, San Francisco Rec and Parks. And it's been actually, I think, a really successful effort of showing where a nonprofit that is focused on promoting coexistence can work with government agencies to help really get the educational materials and messages out to the public. The Presidio has urban coyote study. It's fascinating what's coming out of it, and they've done some great signage working with our different partners. So I look at the whole Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, where we're based, as a really good model of how we can start to understand what it means for a wild carnivore like coyotes to come back into a region where they were actually largely extirpated, and all the different levels of what's needed to dissipate fears, because people are often just terrified the first time they see a predator, and often a coyote is, very frequently the first predator that a person sees or experiences. And so getting in front of, that experience and having the signs and things like you've seen in the Presidio, those are just absolutely fundamental and key to really helping mitigate the fears and the negative encounters.
So keeping in line of mentioning good things, and I wanted to mention too, this year, or at the end of 2020, Governor Newsom signed the bill AB 1788 that stops pesticide companies from using second-generation rat poison. I assume this is a win for the carnivores in our area because they do prey on rat populations.
Absolutely. And that bill, California was the first state to ban rodenticides. And a huge part of the campaign around that focused on the non-target animals that fall victim to secondary, tertiary poisoning. So, for example, if a coyote or a bobcat consumes a poisoned rat, that can compromise their immune system, make them more susceptible to things like mange, and ultimately lead to their death. Mm-hmm. So a huge part of that campaign and success in getting that bill passed in California was pointing out that foxes and coyotes and bobcats and raptors, owls, hawks, etc., that consume rodents are dying in large numbers. And a lot of that came out of data produced by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which started to monitor these secondary and tertiary effects of rodenticides. And it's pretty mind-blowing to see how insidious these poisons are. Yeah. These are poisons that people can often just buy over the counter, decon, other anticoagulants. And so we're hoping that this legislation becomes a model for other states because it is problematic across the U.S.
I agree. And Project Coyote has started a successful first-of-its-kind program, I believe, working with ranchers to coexist with carnivores. Can you explain that or talk about that?
Sure. So Marin County, like most counties in the West and actually throughout the country, but it really started in the West, had contracted with a federal agency called USDA Wildlife Services, formerly known as Animal Damage Control before they had a name change to Wildlife Services, which some believe is a euphemism for an agency that actually kills millions of animals every year. So really, this is an agency that was started in 1931 with passage of the Animal Damage Control Act. And what that did was authorize the Secretary of Agriculture to pretty much promulgate any method deemed necessary to control animals deemed a threat to livestock and agriculture. Wow. How that's translated over the year is millions and millions of animals killed at taxpayer expense, largely at the behest of ranchers and farmers. And unfortunately, the tools of choice are often lethal and indiscriminate. Mm-hmm. So everything from leg hold traps to snares to aerial gunning to predicides, which are predator poisons.
Wow, I did not know that about the USDA. It's crazy.
I know. Most people have never heard of the agency. They're pretty shocked to learn that more than $100 million federal dollars go to this program, and that literally 1 to 3 million animals every year are killed through this program.
Wow.
So in Marin was going to be the testing ground for a very deadly poison called compound 1080. Mm-hmm. And 1080 used to be lethal for use in large-scale poisoning campaigns where, for example, a carcass of a cow or a sheep would be laced with that poison, and the idea being that any predators, including birds of prey, eagles, etc., that prey on that poisoned carcass would succumb to the poison and die. A very slow death, I might add.
That's terrible.
So it's terrible. And the Nixon administration actually banned that poison for that use. Then the poison was brought back under the Reagan administration for use in something called a livestock protection collar. This collar basically goes around the neck of sheep or goats and has two bladders with the poison. The idea being that any predator that attacks at the neck will burst the poison and then succumb. And again, it takes anywhere from 8 to 12 hours for a coyote to succumb to that poison. So when we learned that Marin County was going to be the testing ground for this poison, along with Sonoma and Mendocino in Northern California, we brought this issue to the attention of our board of supervisors. And they had no idea this was happening. Most of them had no idea that every year through the Department of Agriculture, they were signing a contract to allow the use of these types of poisons and deadly methods to kill native wildlife, foxes, bobcats, coyotes, raccoons, etc., badgers. So we essentially launched a campaign that led to ultimately the decision by the Board of Supervisors to end that contract with USDA Wildlife Services and instead to use that money towards a non-lethal program that assists ranchers with implementing more humane, ecologically sound methods. That's been in place now for 21 years, actually. It was 2000. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an effort of a coalition that worked together to put this forward. And really, ultimately, our Marin County Department of Ag and our Marin Commissioner got behind the non-lethal program. I actually worked with him on developing that program. And it's been very successful. And it just shows that we don't have to depend on these lethal, indiscriminate methods that are so destructive. And we have public sentiment behind us as well. I mean, when people find out about this, they're just outraged, especially when they find out and know that it's taxpayer subsidized. So, we're all as an organization about creating these models of coexistence and then scaling them up. Just like the rodenticide bill you mentioned, we hope that as California leads the way on showing, how we live peacefully with wildlife, that can spread to the rest of the nation.
That's great, and that makes sense. I hope California is leading the way and setting a good example. And can you talk about some non-lethal methods being used? I've heard of livestock guardian dogs before. Is that one of the primary non-lethal ways of protection of livestock?
So guard animals for sure. So there are different breeds of guard dogs. There are also llamas that have proven to be very effective for protecting livestock. Better fencing, night corrals, a new device called fox lights that's out of Australia. It's been very effective. And so what's beautiful about our program here in Marin is that is ultimately adaptive in nature, meaning that it's evaluated for what's, going right, wrong, rejiggered, and then new methods are brought in. So when fox lights came on the market, we met with our Department of Ag and actually brought in the inventor of fox lights and showed them how it worked. They purchased hundreds of them and gave them to some of the ranchers to test. And that's how we start integrating these more effective, humane methods into the system. I will say over the last decade, there's been so much research around these issues of efficacy of different methods to reduce conflicts, and then a lot of work being put into additional methods like the fox lights and a whole host of methods like fladry, range riders. So I think it's a growing area, and there's a huge emphasis, I think, because public sentiment is changing and people don't want their tax dollars being used to indiscriminately kill wildlife and a lot of animals that are never problem animals.
What other programs do you have going on at Project Coyote right now?
We have I know you're a little familiar with it, but we have a campaign targeting wildlife killing contests. So this really started back in 2014. We learned of a very large killing contest targeting coyotes in Northern California. And at the time, this was an area where OR7, also known as Journey, a gray wolf, was traversing the landscape. And it was the one gray wolf that was known at the time for returning back to its native home of California. And it was in the area where this huge coyote killing contest was going on. So we appealed to our California Fish and Game Commission to say that not only was OR7 potentially in danger, because we know from other states that many dispersing wolves would be killed by coyote hunters in particular. And then we also appealed to them that the ethics or lack thereof of a mass killing of coyotes needed to be stopped. So we went through a formal petition process with the commission and ultimately got them in December of 2014 to vote to prohibit this practice. And really, it just demonstrated the power of the grassroots. And I will say that campaign was so empowering in that when people started to learn about this, they wanted to take action. They wanted to know what they could do. There were a series of commission meetings where people came from all over the state to come and testify and say, good. We don't want this. And we had a champion in Michael Sutton, who was at the time the president of the California Fish and Game Commission. He pushed that through. And then subsequently in California, it led to other efforts of wildlife protection, banning the trapping of bobcats, trophy hunting bobcats. Then just last year, a ban on recreational and commercial trapping. California becoming the first state to do that.
Yay.
So that was a catalyst to be able to expose what else is going on in terms of mismanagement of our native wildlife. It also led to other states saying, organizations and agencies interested in whether this was happening in their state. So for us, it prompted us to produce a documentary about wildlife killing contests, and that's called Killing Games, Wildlife in the Crosshairs. We produce this on a very small bit, but it really sort of, exposes the barbarity of this practice. Right. And educates. And then, so we call it the 3 E's of exposing, educating, and then empowering people to take action. And since that time, we co-founded a coalition. It's called the National Coalition to End Wildlife Killing Contests. We co-founded that with Humane Society of the United States, and we now have, I think, 53 national and state wildlife and animal protection organizations that are part of that. Continues to grow.
That's great.
And we have one singular mission, which is basically to end this practice in the U.S. And since formation of that coalition, we have banned the practice in 7 states.
Congratulations.
And we have several states, thank you, several states that are considering bans now. So we're very hopeful that, like cockfighting and dogfighting, that we can ultimately ban this practice in the U.S. I know that we have public sentiment behind us. It's just a matter of passing the laws, getting it through the state agency commissions. And that's sometimes the disconnect that we see. The public sentiment is over here with the wild animals, but the state agencies are way back in sort of the hook and bullet mindset.
Fitting analogy, the hook and bullet mindset. Can you give us, a little history about what these killing contests are about? Are they sponsored by these state agencies at all?
I wouldn't say so much that state agencies are sponsoring them. They sanction them in that the animals that are targeted are generally completely unprotected. So they have the status of, as I mentioned, non-game fur barrier varmint. And what that essentially means is we ascribe no protections for you. You can be killed 24/7 in almost unlimited numbers. Wow. And so the state agencies don't even monitor these killing contests, and they don't know, I get media queries of how many animals are killed in these contests or how many are going on. We simply don't know because the state agencies don't monitor them, and the state agencies don't believe that the animals are worth value enough to actually monitor their populations. So it's a huge problem. Since we started that coalition and started monitoring as best as we could, where and when these contests are happening, we find them all over. And I think in some ways growing. I mean, we just saw the massacre of wolves in Wisconsin in the last couple of weeks. And the mindset that likes to go out there and trophy hunt these animals.
It's disturbing.
It's very disturbing.
Very disturbing. Anyways, there are at least 2 films I know of that Project Coyote is part of. One is the Killing Games, Wildlife in the Crosshairs, produced by Project Coyote, and Wildlife Killing Contest, produced by Philippe d'Andrade. And both show glimpses of these horrific contests. And to be honest, some of these scenes are very difficult to watch. But I believe in this case, these visuals and this power of film can really inspire someone to take action. I know it inspired me to want to take more action. So can you tell us how these films came to be?
So Felipe is a National Geographic filmmaker who approached us and said, I've seen your film, Killing Games, Wildlife in the Crosshairs. We want to work on a film with you, basically pick up where you left off with that film. And where we left off with Killing Games was essentially showing what happened in California and what led to that ban, and then also showing that this is happening all over the US.
Yeah.
So when Philippe and his teammate Brian approached us on this, I said, absolutely, we'll work with you on this. And so they actually embedded in some killing contests in Texas, particularly the big bobcat contest. This is a contest where the top winner wins $50,000, the second $40,000, the third $30,000. So the monetary incentives to go out and mass kill our beautiful bobcats, our beautiful mountain lions in Texas, coyotes, wolves in Idaho. People are just shocked to learn when they hear about this.
Yeah.
Even policymakers. I will say that, we've gone to different state commissions to take action on this. Many of them have no idea this is even happening or that it's legal in the state. And these are ostensibly the stewards of our state's wildlife. So what we're up against, first and foremost, is a lack of public awareness and then laws that need to be changed. And so really, our getting to work with this film team was amazing. And our hope is that that film will be the catalyst to many, many more states taking action. I will say with it, when we launched it, we also launched a petition on our website to support a ban of wildlife killing contests on public lands. Again, most people are shocked to hear that on, federal public lands, these killing contests, mass killing of wildlife is totally legal. So that petition, and I will say, in just 2 weeks, we got more than 50,000 people signing that petition. It is to support a federal ban of killing contests on federal public lands. We are hopeful that we will have sponsors this year to introduce federal legislation, and we're hopeful that with a lot of public support and legislative support, we can get that through.
Well, that's terrific. And I just wanted to ask too, do you feel a little more hopeful with the new administration that things will move along?
Absolutely. There's some excellent appointments that are being made to key agencies that I think will be behind us in some of these efforts. So we're very hopeful. I will also say, just for your listeners, the action that we can take at the federal level is limited often to federal public lands. So there still will have to be a state-by-state campaign, especially when we're talking about things like killing contests. Right. The best that we can do at the federal level, is to ban them on the federal public lands, but we still will have to go to the states to ban it on state lands and private lands. So it's a multifaceted campaign. We're using the media, we're using science, we're using all different angles to tackle this. And I will also say that the killing contest issue really opens up the door to talk about the bigger issue of predator mismanagement in the U.S. because it's really symptomatic. It's just one egregious method of how we treat these most vitally important animals and the lack of protections afforded by our state agencies and federal agencies.
And how can people help?
So first and foremost is to sign that petition. And when you do, we then send additional ways to get engaged and involved in this issue. That does include things like talking to your state legislators, contacting your state commissioners, writing letters to the editor, helping show our film and get it out far and wide, all sorts of different methods. And so we are about active engagement, getting people active. And so people can visit our website, projectcoyote.org. They can sign the petition there. They can also watch the film trailer. And there is a link to the film now. The film company has posted that film. We will be doing a national live stream of the film. We'll have a Q&A afterwards as well with producers and people in the film. So I encourage people to keep an eye out on our website for that. I will also share that this afternoon I'm doing an interview with the DC Environmental Film Festival along with Felipe de Andrade, the producer and director. And that will be our global premiere at the DC Environmental Film Festival, which is mid-March. So people can also view there.
Oh, terrific. So I also wanted to recommend that people watch Coyote Still Wild at Heart. This is the film that introduced me to you and Project Coyote, and it is a great film showing the coexistence of coyotes in urban areas with the people living there.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a film by San Francisco filmmaker Melissa Peabody.
Okay.
And she made that actually right around the time that I founded Project Coyote. And it's a beautiful film about coyotes coming back into San Francisco, but also then, as you mentioned, going into other areas like Chicago and showing some of the amazing research that's being done and what we're learning about coyotes in urban landscapes. So yeah, it's a very relevant, still relevant film. It is available, I believe, on our website. So yeah. And I think the short version actually too, if you Google Still Wild at Heart, American Coyote Still Wild at Heart, you can view the short version online.
Oh, that's great. So I always ask people at the end of the show, what gives you hope, or what are you feeling hopeful for right now?
What gives me the most hope is when I see people working together around these issues and the grassroots component. I would say almost every one of our victories has had an element of that, if not a dominant element, of people working together, forming coalitions, and effectively, strategically, thoughtfully manifesting a campaign. And that's part of, why we're here, is we have not only started this national coalition, but we've worked to support regional coalitions. And these are often just, people who care about wildlife and who want to get active. And then we connect them with other advocates. And then they form a coalition. And then they go to their legislature or their commission and they say, we want this changed. That to me is the power of this movement. And where I think ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, where the power for change is going to emanate from. And I'm also hopeful with some of the changes I see at the federal level, too. I think it's much slower in terms of, for wildlife at the federal level, to get a bill through is incredibly difficult. That's why I am so focused on the grassroots. I will also say I think, media and social media are huge, huge assets to us. And we are increasingly using everything from Instagram to TikTok to YouTube to get our messages out there. And there's lots of opportunities for engagement there, too. So what gives me hope is people and also kids. I will say we have a Keeping It Wild youth education and outreach program where we work with educators and youth. And when I see young people who want to get active, people like Greta, it's inspiring, and we have many young people and educators who are working with us. And that gives me actually the greatest hope.
Well, thank you so much, Camilla. And I really appreciate all you do. And I appreciate you taking time today and talking about these important issues.
Thank you so much. Love to come back.
Well, that's today's show, and I am Marcia Sivek, and this show has been a production of BeProvided Conservation Radio. Please take a moment and head to www.projectcoyote.org and sign the petition against these horrific killing contests, and also to learn more about their programs promoting the coexistence of wildlife and humans. Project Coyote also has a number of resources to download, like already designed social media images, so you can post to your social media page. I would like to thank Gina Farr for the audio of the Coyotes, so thank you. And you can see some beautiful pictures of these amazing animals like wolves, bobcats, and coyote on our site at www.beprovided.com. and see some of these beautiful pictures that some wildlife photographers have contributed to Project Coyote. So stay safe and healthy, everyone. Thanks for listening.